Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The 13th Malaysia Plan identifies aging as one of the country's defining challenges, and Budget 2026 follows through on that, allocating 1.26 billion ringgit to strengthen welfare for older persons. But translating policy intent into practical impact is another story. Are we investing enough in the systems and the services to build the long-term care system Malaysia will soon need? Joining me on the show to discuss this further is Chai Sen Tyng, who's the Senior Research Officer at UPM's Malaysia Research Institute on Aging, better known as MyAgeing. Chai, welcome back to the show. It's good to have you on. Let's talk about this 1.26 billion ringgit that was allocated under Budget 2026 for the welfare of older persons. I'm just wondering what you think the government should focus on to ensure that those funds really produce measurable improvements in the welfare of older persons.
I think, thanks, Melissa, for having us. I think the most important thing is to note that I think the government is spending way more than 1.2 or 3 billion on seniors. I think the funding for Bantuan Warga Emas, or older persons assistance, which is about 600 ringgit a month, is already roughly about 1.1 billion. So the bulk of it, 90%, 95% of the 1.2 billion actually goes to a cash transfer program under the Department of Social Welfare at 600 ringgit a month. The number of beneficiaries has stagnated in the past few years, but we are seeing some recent increase to about 160,000. According to the Prime Minister's budget speech, it seems like they are targeting 180,000. So that's good news, right? Trying to increase coverage. But actually, the government also spent roughly about 30 over billion, I think, on civil service pensions, that benefits about close to 960,000 pensioners and pension recipients, the survivor pensions. We also have a small number that is getting some form of SOCSO pensions, but that doesn't come under the general revenue because that's funded directly through SOCSO. And of course, we have EPF, but since not many people take up the annuity option, and technically SOCSO and EPF does not cost taxpayers funding directly. So I would say that the budget is a conservative one. There are a few points where they try and highlight some new initiatives like QAP's retirement home project, 300 million. And there are also some mentions about different deductions and allocations here and there. So I suppose it would be more like playing defense in this budget. I suppose the government didn't make key announcements on pension reforms, but I suppose those will take some time as we are still short on details and the pathway ahead on how we can introduce more long-term care and social protection pension reforms.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So what you've kind of laid out for us is cash transfers. So when we think about cash support, it's almost always short-term. How should policymakers think about that balance? Because you want to make sure that whatever's being allocated is being used for cash transfers, for short-term protections, with balancing that with investments in services like home care, rehabilitation, mental health for older adults.
Yeah, I think that's a good question because when you think about it, if we give cash transfers to seniors and their family members, then ideally that they will be able to purchase services that they need. But because the quantum of the assistance is so small, then it's very difficult. And one of the biggest stumbling blocks is that if you receive this Bantuan Warga Emas and you decide to check into a aged care facility or pusat jagaan warga emas, you can no longer use that fund. So you're not entitled to it any longer because under the premise that you are being taken care of, the aged care facility. But that's not really true, because you still have to pay for some services unless you're entering into a charitable home or whatsoever. But in that case, the charitable home could do with that funding, to help cross subsidize the residents. So there are other beneficiaries that are not really mentioned, because Bantuan Am, which we call the general aid under the state welfare officers, actually most of them, the recipients are elderly as well, but their quantum would be lower. It wouldn't be 600 ringgit a month, maybe closer to 300 or 400 ringgit, depending on which state you are. So we also have Bantuan Zakat. So the idea here is exactly like what you mentioned. The idea here is that, if we give money to the seniors, they are not all staying on their own. They are all not able to spend the funds on their own. So the real question here is that care is a totally different component, because while you can give cash to the elderly, he might be or she might be bedridden. A lot of the withdrawals at the bank is actually being done by the adult children or grandchildren. So care is still a major issue. So that is why it's always never enough to just have one solution. So we need also what we call home and community-based care services. We also need long-term care facilities. We also need long-term care financing. But perhaps we also need a lot of laws, like elder abuse and neglect laws. We also need adult protection act, or we even call in some case those advanced medical directives. So there are many things we could do. It's certainly not within the limitations of the budget speech, but it is spelled out in RMK 13. So it's all part of the implementation plan.
Right. Could you help me understand, Chai? What does the current research or the current thinking around the workforce that's needed for quality elder care in Malaysia? When you think about that, I mean, I'm sure we have the informal caregivers as well, the family members, yes. But when you think about the formal sector, nurses, care staff, what does the current research say about that?
Yeah, because we realize that there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what is long-term care and what is actually hospital and what we call tertiary care. Actually, they are very different things, and that's why national health insurance goes to a different place. Long-term care insurance goes to aged care operators. It's two different service providers. But somehow in Malaysia, we seem to think that all of it comes under hospitals or doctors. You don't really need doctors at a long-term care facility. It depends. You probably will need one or two nurses and assistant nurses. But if the elderly's condition is stable and it's more like a aged care facility rather than a nursing home, then they would need care services, caregivers. And this is what we feel that from our studies and research, we think that we probably need a law to register care workers. It won't, it's not meant to be punitive. The idea here is that, it's just like the childminders registration. If you want, there is an existing one. If you want to be a childminder, you have to be registered. Of course, some people will hire non-registered childminders, but if you register them, then you can say that, is this person's training recognized? Are they qualified? Or at least we say the word, are they trained? Later, you can add a label of whether they're qualified. But it is a starting point, because many countries need to, for any profession to become a service that is monitored, that has professional development, we need to register them. And maybe through this registration exercise, then the government can say that, hey, you are not trained or you're insufficiently trained. Let's bring you to ISM or bring you to MAPAM or bring you to any of these training centers, and the government can pay for your training. So that way the intervention can work, in the sense that they have registered care workers, and the goal or the target is to increase the percentage of train or retrain or CPD points. Every year you allocate or log in 6 hours or something like that to keep yourself abreast of the ability to care. It is also a very good feature that will enable us to bring in foreign workers. Like, for example, if we have maid and whatsoever, we can lock them into the system, and then at least we say that, hey, we have, maybe X number of domestic helpers who are properly trained to take care of the elderly, and that will actually help in terms of elevating the issue of manpower faced by many operators in Malaysia at the present.
So are all of these kind of in the works? So you mentioned that RMK 13, the 13th Malaysia Plan, looks at this from a more holistic, whole of government approach. Is this on track? Do we know and do we now understand what it is being laid out for us with the, if I'm not mistaken, was it the National Aging Blueprint? Whether that's been put into practice or being put into the process of implementation?
I think they are. The National Aging Blueprint most likely will go to the Parliament first. I think the other one is under the Ministry of Women's care economy framework or care industry framework. So there are movements. There's also the Senior Citizen Bill. So the question here is, until the final document is out, we don't know how it will look like. But it definitely means that, or it signals that there's going to be public funding going into these places to try and make it happen. So which one that will be prioritized and in what final form it will take, it will all depend on public engagement. And sometimes a lot of times it's actually also depending on the public, because if the public seems to feel that, let's have a new minister of aging and the problems will get solved by itself, then maybe they might lean on that, so I suppose that's why I said we need a lot of conversations, we need a lot of discussions, especially among the stakeholders themselves, especially the operators, especially the family and caregivers. Then we can understand what form of intervention or policy intervention works the best.
But you sitting in MyAgeing, having the I guess the insight of research and maybe also kind of a bird's eye view of the aging population, what would you like government to prioritize? So with this blueprint, what are you hoping there be the primary object, the primary priority for this?
Definitely, Melissa. I think they will try and list everything. But we have to prioritize, right? We can't be doing everything all at the same time. So the institute definitely has Dr. Rahima, our director, is her core specialization is human services, aged care services, and that's one of the reasons why our research track has taken a different turn. We don't really try and survey residents of old folks' homes and all that, because our main point of departure was to understand the aged care industry as a business, as a business model. And that is why when we did the survey, a telephone survey with residential aged care operators, we learn a lot about the industry. We understand what they feel that they need, but we also must temper it with the realities of the national policy, which they would not likely encourage more foreign workers in Malaysia. So the question then becomes, how do we make care workers or care work more attractive to locals? And we have actually even tapped as far as during these roundtable sessions or workshops being organized by the ministries, that we say that, there's really nothing wrong for Malaysia to introduce a pension just for care workers, right? We give allowances or pensions to what we call these guru kafas or kemas ex-teachers or whatsoever. So in the past, teachers are also on their own provident fund, before they're all absorbed under the civil service. So the idea here is that because our culture and our country has less examples of union-like behavior or union groups where you have industry-based pensions. It's very common overseas. It's just that over here, we hardly think about them anymore. But if you want to make a profession to be attractive, and it's not necessarily a white-collar job, then you have to probably entice the worker to say that if you have served, or say like 10 years or 15 years as a caregiver, you'll be entitled to a small, stable pension in old age. This is exactly why some people in the US, young men and women, signed up into the army, because if they serve for a certain period of time, they will get veteran benefits. Healthcare costs is horrible in the US. Yeah. So you can have a lot of trouble going without. So many of them actually serve for a brief time in the armed forces in order to qualify. So I think we are thinking along those lines to try and make it more attractive, other than trying to tell everyone that, like a teacher's job, like a nurse job, these are dignified tasks. It's not like hire of last resort or something like
Yeah.
that.
What an interesting proposal. I would be interested to see how this develops. Chai, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some of these insights. I appreciate your time. Chai Sen Tyng there from MyAgeing, and we're going to take a quick break here and consider this. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about Budget 2026, which is in which the government has set aside some 1.26 billion ringgit for the welfare of older persons. That's just part of the allocation and part of the efforts laid out under RMK 13, or the 13th Malaysia Plan, to prepare the country for an aging population. Joining me now is Delren Terrence Douglas, who is president of the Association for Residential Aged Care Operators, better known as AGECOPE. Delren, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. There's a lot to cover here, but I do want to ask you, because you have a unique perspective of residential aged care providers, tell us what are the immediate challenges that operators face in providing safe, quality elder care?
Immediate challenges. The first two main immediate challenges, one is licensing of centers, making the process of licensing easier. And number two, the lack of nurses or caregivers locally who are willing to work at elderly care centers to assist in the care of the elderly. These are the two main challenges.
Okay.
Main ones.
And Delren, do you believe that policymakers are aware that these are the challenges that care providers like yourself face?
Yeah, policymakers are aware, but again, even though in Plan Malaysia, when I met the housing ministry under Plan Malaysia, they are aware of all these challenges, but at the state levels, land issues falls under state jurisdiction. So it's a conflict. Federal says one thing, but state government may not follow up with it because they have a different alignment in what they have to do for the elderly. On top of that, town councils have their own bylaws or guidelines that again conflicts with federal government requirements or view, or federal government's vision for the elderly. So the lower level, as the lower level you go, the people down there, the government servants or the government leaders at the lower rung of the hierarchy are not in sync with the federal government.
Right. Okay, well, talk to me a little bit about that, because when I think about older people's welfare, it spans everything from health, from transport, from housing, social protection. When you mentioned the lack of a kind of connecting thread, or the cohesiveness of policy making throughout, from bottom to top and top to bottom, talk to me about what that would, what you as an operator will need. What would a whole of government, both state and federal, look like in practice?
I would love if the government can set up a special body just for the elderly, but it must comprise the housing ministry, MOF, the health ministry, the women's development ministry, the human resource ministry, because all these works together to make the care for elderly workable. They cannot be running in silos. One ministry decides one thing and another ministry doesn't follow up. Example, we are lacking of caregivers or trained caregivers in the country. Yet at the same time, when nobody locally, this is like the 3D occupation. It's not glamorous. They don't see a future in it. But when we want to employ foreign workers into this sector, we are not allowed to, because there is a law governing that says foreign workers are not allowed to work in elderly care centers. So it doesn't align. On top of that, another ministry, again, an example, is MOF, Ministry of Finance themselves. They have classified elderly care centers under category C, which is lumped together with wellness, spa, massage parlor, beauty salon. So why are we categorized under category C by MOF and not under health category I? So MOF themselves have categorized us wrongly, resulting in category C, we have to pay SST, even though we are taking care of health. Whereas private hospitals, government hospitals are all, they have a waiver for being under category I, under health. So are those going to the elderly care centers considered wellness or lumped together massage parlor or spa or beauty salon? So there's some conflicts there. And human resource, another ministry that needs to work aligned together is the housing ministry, whereby the housing ministry set up Plan Malaysia, physical, garis panduan physical, pusat jagaan warga emas. They have a beautiful guideline there. But the town council have their own guideline, own bylaws that sometimes conflict with the federal guidelines. And because it's just guidelines, anyone can come up with a guideline. It doesn't have to comply with the federal guideline. So all these people have to sit down together to solve the elderly care issue. Why I think it's urgent, we have, it's estimated by DOSM, our Department of Statistics, that our elderly will triple by 2030. There is 4.5 million senior citizens. Bear in mind, if the figure triples, even a small percentage of them were to move to the elderly care centers, and if the figure were to triple also conservatively, we are way far behind in licensing centers. We are way far behind in ensuring there are enough caregivers to take care of all these people, because our elderly are living longer, and there'll come a time when they reach a certain age where they will need someone to take care of them. I know the government plan to have healthy aging at home, but even with a healthy aging at home, they will come to a stage where they will need assisted living. So where are the caregivers coming from? Where will they come from?
Darren, can I just ask you, what's the current capacity in Malaysia when you talk about the residential aged care for assisted living? Talk to me about the beds or places, or maybe even the regions or groups that are underserved.
Okay, underserved are the B40 categories. Okay, firstly, our membership alone, AGECOPE membership alone, we have about 11,000 residents in our centers. And bear in mind, not all the care centers nationwide are our members yet. Many fear of being members because they fear by being a member, the ministries will be aware of their existence and fine them for not getting their license yet. But also at the same time, it's because of the ministries they cannot get their license. So it's a chicken and egg issue. Okay, so but membership-wise, we have 11,000 people. Majority are the B40. Now, we have a problem with the B40. On one hand, the government has 8 centers nationwide, 8 to cater for the whole nation, which is insufficient, but they depend on us, the private sectors, to assist them. Now, we have cases whereby elderly who are on bantuan kewangan, where they get subsistence, and the one from the 1.6 billion, they are getting 600 ringgit monthly. Then they come to a stage whereby they need assisted living. So they come to our center, they say, with the 600, they will pay us to take care of them. The funny thing is, our government, when the moment they see an elderly using the money they receive from JKM, the 600 to pay us, since you can afford to pay your money to them, we will take away that bantuan. And it's happening, and it has happened. In Negeri Sembilan, we get this kind of issues. In Penang, we get this kind of issues. So are the government officers aware 600 is not even enough to make those centers rich, to enrich those centers? And they are helping the government to take care of this elderly at whatever the elderly can afford. And they can only afford the 600 that they get. So we need, definitely need someone to sit down, take all these ministries, put under one umbrella, put AGECOPE inside. We can give you the solution, we can give them the solution. Is whether they can work on it. They need to be a political will to get things moving.
Okay. Well, it seems that the vision is there, but you're right. The implementation, there seems to be huge gaps in the implementation. You mentioned another huge challenge for the industry is the lack of local workforce. Now, what would you like to see happen to strengthen the care workforce, and particularly to bring in more local people, entice or make this sector more appealing to the local workforce?
Just like I have an experience working as an auditor in the banking industry, they have a salary scale. Why not have salary scale for caregivers, not paying ad hoc, different centers paying at different rate? Have a salary scale that they can have when they join a care center, they can see this is a standardized salary scale, this is what I should be getting. Overtime, this is the rate of overtime. Then it will make people coming into the industry aware that, hey, this is protected, this is what I will get in return for working, and there won't be abusers. Number one. Number two, we need to have a training program. Now there is no standardized training syllabus for the entire nation's caregivers. There's none. Everyone is working on silos. Different company has come up with a different training program, and Jabatan Tenaga Kerja has approved their training program. Different people, but there's no one standardized nationwide. I would love to see approved, standardized, everything is covered, have a salary scale, they are protected. If you have a list of the caregivers nationwide, those who abuse residents can be blacklisted. Those who good care, there must be something like this to get things moving, that we have a proper system. Pay should be increased, but bear in mind, a lot of the B40 centers can't afford if the pay is too high. So maybe government subsistence may have to come in to cover the cost of those elderly.
Yeah. Well, Delren, thank you so much for giving us an insight into the operators for elder care. I appreciate your time. Delren Terrence Douglas there, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.